This video is brought to you by MoviePalette.com and enter ROOM15 for 15% off of your palette. If you thought the last few serial killer films that I've reviewed were made cheaply or were cheesy or poorly made, you have not seen the films directed by Uwe Lamel. Yes, I'm continuing my run-through / marathon of real-life serial killer films. And not only is this the first review of a film that I have not seen, but it's also the first directed by Uwe Lamel, who is probably most well known for directing the 1980 supernatural slasher film, The Boogeyman. I know it's a cult film. I've always hated it. I have a huge rant of it here on the channel. But in the early to late 2000s, when there was the slew of cheap serial killer films being made, Uwe Lamel directed a handful of them, like at least 7 or 8 of them. So that's actually going to make up probably a bulk of, well, not a bulk, but a good number of the films that I'll be reviewing for this marathon. And the only other film I've seen of his, other than The Boogeyman, was one of his true crime films. And I say this because they're all, to my understanding, very loosely based. So, and I did not really know that going into this film, but I believe... Okay, so it doesn't say on this, but for some of his films, Marion Dora actually had a hand in, I don't know if he was cinematography or what, but some of his serial killer films. And Lamel was supposed to do the film on the German killer, the one that posted the ad on Craigslist that wanted to kill and eat someone. He met someone that wanted to be killed and eaten, had that story. But Marion Dora wrote it. Lamel said it was too extreme, so Marion Dora made that film Cannibal, but Uwe Lamel would adapt a fictionalized account of it on his own called Diary of a Cannibal, which is still one of the worst movies I've ever seen. I used to own it. I don't know what happened to it. But that's the only other film of Lamel's that I've seen, of this era, this kind. And unfortunately, this movie is loosely based on, if I could say, one of my favorite serial killers. In my last review, I said that Bundy I've always found to be the most fascinating, interesting, and has always been my favorite. This is my second favorite killer. I find him almost just as fascinating, but for different reasons. It's a 2005 film which came out the same year that this killer was finally caught, and it's The BTK Killer by Torture Kill, whose real name is Dennis Rader from Wichita, Kansas. And yeah, this movie sucks. I do have 2 other BTK films to get to. Hunt for the BTK Killer, which is a TV movie where Greg Henry actually plays Rader. Greg Henry been in a bunch of films. He was the mayor in Slither. That's probably what most people know him as. This one might be the best one. I haven't seen it yet. And then there's another half-fictional one with Kane Hodder playing BTK, just called BTK. So I had these to get to. Oddly enough, there's been more films loosely inspired by BTK than films actually about him, which BTK is also a prominent character in the show Mindhunter. But Trinity from Dexter, he was modeled after BTK. Stephen King's Good Marriage, loosely inspired by BTK. Clove Hitch Killer, the IFC film, that's probably the best BTK film there is. And the killer himself and everything he does is modeled after Rader, but it's a fictional movie. If they had just tweaked it and named him Dennis Rader, that would have been a great BTK film. This is not. Stars Gerard Griesbaum as Raider in the 70s, and Eric B. Gerlman as Raider in 2005. Because 2005 was when Raider finally got caught. And, like the Dahmer film, like the Ed Gein film that I did, it takes place in 2005, leading up to him getting caught, with all these flashbacks of, I guess, key elements of Raider's life, even though they're not. It's highly, highly fictionalized. This is not a good representation of BTK. I don't know if that's what Lamel was going for. I mean, here on the cover, he looks enough like Raider. That's it. That's the only positive that I can give it. But I don't even know where to begin. It's shot on video for one. It's a shot on Shidio flick. Lamel has always done these like weird close-ups, and he'll do these like, it'll go into these weird color transitions, or like camera spinning or sideways, or a kind of shaky cam, I guess for effect. It's a really bad shot on video film that is shot poorly, acted abysmally, horribly acted, and other than that, Victoria Ullman, who I believe is the news anchor, she's kind of our lead, our present day lead. No, that's Miss Hatch. I don't even remember who that character was. Danielle Petty plays Lacey Peterson. They really named their character Lacey Peterson. Scott Peterson's wife. Awesome. And Crystal Nelson plays his wife from 1974. Christian Bem has two roles. Oh, wait, that's someone else. Who was the wife in present day? Doesn't even say. Wow. Cinematography. There's no Wikipedia, so I gotta read it off this. It doesn't even say. Wow. Visual effects, John Kanucky and Robert J. Walsh. It just says camera. Bianco Pacelli. So I'll try to make this quick. BTK, Dennis Rader, he killed 10 people between 1974 and 1991. He was known to send letters to the media and the police. That's where he came up with the name BTK. One of them said, bind them, torture them, kill them, BTK. Supposedly he had always wanted to be a serial killer. When he was a kid, he was obsessed with earlier killers like Harvey Glattman. He found out at a young age that he had some sort of sexual desire or fantasy for bondage, being restrained or tied up, seeing women tied up. Like Bundy, he liked really graphic, kind of pornographic material. In the set, he met his wife Paula, which she was named Paula in this, in 1971, I believe, and that's when they got married. Had two kids, Carrie, who actually wrote a book, A Serial Killer's Daughter, which I have not read this yet. Apparently she has forgiven him, but has a hard time really coming to the understanding that he's BTK. And a son named Brian. The movie depicts just two sons. He used to work in the meat department of this one store, but then he worked for ADT between, I think, 78 and 88. I could be wrong about that, or maybe it was 74 and 88. 74 to 88, he worked for ADT. Oddly enough, because, I don't know why I'm holding that up, that's poor representation, because his MO was he would find a woman, stalk her, and, he'd go to her, follow her to her house. He had the stalking phase. He had all these phases. He was really into the idea of, like, a secret agent, because every victim, when he was stalking them, they had projects, like Project Foxhole, stuff like that. So that's what he would call it. He always snipped the phone line on the day he was going to break in. So that kind of became a telltale sign that BTK's been to your house, that the phone line was cut. So he would break in and he would use the ruse that he was this escaped convict and he needed money, the car, and the driver's license. The driver's license was his trophy. Also, I believe women's underwear was also his trophy. So he had, I think, 6 projects because his first project, he killed an entire family, the Oteros. He was only expecting Julie Otero, the mother, and her 2 kids, Joseph Jr. and Josephine, but their father was also home, so he killed all 4 of them. And then after that, he had 2 projects in 74, 2 in 77, I think 85, 86, and then 91. So actually 7. 7 projects, excuse me. And then between 91 and 2005, he was absent. Everyone thought he vanished. He was going to be the next Zodiac or the next Jack the Ripper. But then he got cocky. He started sending letters to the press again. And it all unfolded when, he was communicating with someone and asked if floppy disk can be traced. They were like, no, of course not. So he went to his church, put this letter on a floppy, sent it to them, and that's how they traced it to the church and found out that it was of Dennis Rader. Which also, they knew that BTK had the kind of car he had. I believe it was a black Cherokee or a black Jeep. And yeah, the whole thing he would tie the women up. Most of them he strangled or suffocated with a bag. He had what he called his hit kit, which was everything he would need to break in, murder, clean up. After the murders, he would just walk around the house, pleasuring himself. In the 80s, when he wasn't killing, he would go on these motel trips where he would dress up like a woman, wear a creepy female mask, and take pictures of himself tied up in bondage, looking like a female victim. I guess that was his, better than nothing vice at that time. And why I always found him super fascinating is because I'm really fascinated by pillars of the community. Gacy was another one, but I think BTK more so. Wife, kids. He was a Boy Scout when he was a child. He was a Scout Master or a Scout Leader after he had kids. He was a church deacon. He dog catcher, neighborhood watch, kind of a title. And he was just a very well respected person of the community. Last person that you would expect. I mean, he really did, look like anybody's dad. So that's BTK, or at least that's the cliff notes of BTK. You can find a ton of stuff on him. There's the Confessions of BTK Killer, written by Catherine Ramsland. There's also a documentary of this out now. John Douglas, one of the biggest FBI profilers and creator of Mindhunter, he wrote Inside the Mind of BTK, which this is a great book. It's got a bunch of photos and even some of the creepy ones I probably can't show of his hotel trips. His biggest fantasy was to have like a barn or like a silo where there was all these rooms of torture that he would have. I do have another book on BTK coming on top of, like I said, probably 24 encyclopedic books like this. I just pulled this because he's on the cover. And then numerous documentaries. There is an NBC DVD of the BTK Confessions, but it's kind of pricey on Amazon. So now we come to this. So yeah, the film goes back and forth between 2005 and 1974 and 79, which I think it shows most of the victims he kills are in 79. He never killed anybody in 79. Two projects in 74 and two in 77. So he didn't kill anyone in 79. He's also depicted as having, back in the 70s, a long ponytail, which he was always very conservative looking, always dressed nice, short hair. He does have his mustache. That's probably the only accurate thing. I don't think he wore glasses back then, but the actor's wearing glasses. And his hit kit, which in real life consisted of ligatures, at least one or two handguns, rope, handcuffs, stuff like that, plastic bags, stuff for cleaning. His kit in this is a wicker basket with different scary animals in it. Like the first time it's rats, then it's a snake or a tarantula, earthworms. Because even though he ties the victims up in this, it's not the sexual gratification of the bondage and the control. Here is just scaring the women. And although it does show him using the ruse of, I want to rob you, I need your car, but that quickly just shifts to just completely demeaning them and trying to scare them with these, like earthworms, like, you make garbage, they eat your garbage, they're better than you, they're greater than you, and putting tarantulas on them or snakes, usually tying them up with their own scarves or pantyhose or something. His kit is useless in this. It shows that he has two sons, not a son and a daughter. But it does show him, being a prominent member of the church. The only thing to do with scouts, and these were probably the best scenes of the movie, when he's with his family. Now, we've already seen the really bad scenes of him committing his crimes, but juxtaposed to the scenes with his family, like, saying grace before the meals, or having his two sons share Boy Scout trivia, how the Boy Scouts started, and then him helping finish their stories and being proud of them, while also having these fantasies of binding and killing this one woman that's with them. I don't know if it's their aunt or a neighbor. One of his last victims actually was his neighbor, but I don't think that's who that was. It doesn't show his first victim or victims. It doesn't show the Otero murders. In fact, the first victim we see, it already hints that this isn't his first time. It does play on his narcissism. The first victim we see, she says how I saw you on the news, and then he gets upset because it's local, not national news. Like, how many people do I have to kill? So, it hints that that's not his first time. So, I don't know if they just didn't want to show him killing a whole family. Which also, I forgot to mention, Francis Dollarhide, the Red Dragon, he was inspired by BTK. He wasn't caught at the time, but the notion that he killed an entire family, that inspired the Red Dragon. All the victim names are very different. I'm trying to remember, there was, or at least I remember there was I think, a Kate or a Katie, which his second victim, his second project after the Oteros was a woman named Catherine Bright, who I think was the only one not to die in her home. She died at the hospital. And then, let's see, there was Kate. There was a woman named Dolores, who was his last victim in 91, not 74. And she was in her 60s, not a younger woman as the film shows. There was a woman named Vicky, which there was a Vicky. It was his next to last victim. which that was in 86, not 79, as the film shows. But other than that, so I guess the names actually were right. They were just placed weird. Um, yeah, I really don't know what to say. And then it just bounces back and forth between him with his wife and his church, and him trying to either come to terms with being BTK, like holding his Bible, or being mad that the media is not showing his latest letter. And just this news anchor who doesn't want to talk about BTK on the news because she finds it sick. Her boss is pushing her. Ultimately, they say, turn yourself in, and then we'll air it. Which I don't think that's how that played out. But yeah, the acting is terrible. The acting is fucking awful. And especially from the guy playing Raider. The 2005 Raider, Eric Gerlman, isn't terrible, but Gerard Griesbaum as Killer BTK in the 70s, he was pretty bad. It does show him writing out the letters, but none of it was real. They sounded more like Jack the Ripper or Son of Sam type notes. Weren't these obsessive, like serial killer obsessed, almost psychology sounding letters that Raider actually wrote? And yeah, the really only one kill does he seem to get sexual satisfaction from killing, and it's really odd because he takes this meat, stuffs it in her throat, then takes her scarf, strangles her. But when the camera pans from her face up to him, it looks like he's climaxing. We see his hand is empty, but he's still like this, as if he's supposed to look like he's strangling her, but he's not holding anything. I don't know what's up with that. Um, Also, this depicts him as being like a hater of people and finding animals beautiful, which Raider was known to torture animals as a child, as many of them were. But here, like when he's taunting his victims and putting whatever creepy crawlies on them, there's all this footage, real life slaughterhouse footage, superimposed over it. And as in, like, have you ever been in a slaughterhouse? Have you seen what happens to the animals? Do you know what happens to the animals? Do you care? So almost like he's more mad at humans, seeing humans is lower than animals. Now he's taking it out on them. The sexual aspect of the bondage and the binding and the torturing is seriously downplayed. And I know he worked in the meat department of a store, but I don't think it was a slaughterhouse as this depicts. And that makes it seem like it's his only job, like he still works there. Whereas by the time his murder started in January of 74, he was already at, well, maybe he wasn't at ADT yet. Which also, Kate, or Katie, aka Catherine Bright, that said 74, but it said March. She was killed in April. So, yeah, maybe he was still there, but I don't know. Because that was in January of 74. Well, actually, no, because if it was Catherine Bright, it would have been April of 74, so he could have been at ADT by that time. But, yeah, and there are some lines like, Wichita's most notorious serial killer after 30 years, which, yeah, 31 years since his first murder, but he vanished for 14 years. And if he was apprehended in, I always forget what month, but it was 2005, February 25th, he was arrested in his car, which surprisingly this shows. Actually, I want to get the release date for this because I want to see how fast this came out. Uh, God, this thing is slow. And I could go on just about the cinematography, how it's filmed. Uh, I've seen low budget films, but this is like that bad experiment. You can definitely tell Marion Dora was kind of a protege of Uwe Lamel. I would say Marion Dora is able to make it look better or maybe a bit more artistic, but yeah, it is the the direction and the cinematography and the way it tries to, like spin the camera sometimes or get some weird lighting or cuts to different things or superimposing different images. It just doesn't work. Where's the actual release date? It just says 2005, so I guess IMDb doesn't give a shit either. But yeah. Anyway, oh, April 6, 2007, but that was when it was released in Japan. So I don't know. Within months of his uh, capture, this came out, which I'm guessing it's obvious because there's very little about his real life in it. And yeah, I was supremely disappointed by this. BTK is my second favorite serial killer. If you're offended by the term favorite, I apologize. I don't know what other word to use. Uh, my top five would actually, I'll save that. But I've always been fascinated by BTK. I'm not saying there needs to be like the Netflix Dahmer show. I don't expect that of these films, but the films that he inspired are actually better. Ones that are not Dennis Rader and are completely fictional are might even be better than the ones actually based on him. Now, again, the one that I have the most hope for is the Hunt for the BTK Killer. I know these TV movies usually do better. I mean, The Deliberate Stranger, Ted Bundy, To Catch a Killer, John Wayne Gacy, Helter Skelter, Manson. They're all considered the best of that killer. But yeah, it really does not get a whole lot right. I mean, some of the victim names, sure, but the the order in which they are, or even the ages, uh, they're off. Even the years. I mean, he didn't kill anybody in 1979. His hit kit, I don't know why he made it animals, like creepy animals, and trying to scare them. I don't know why he could just put rope, pantyhose, crowbar, handguns, everything he actually had in his hit kit. It doesn't show him stalking, doesn't talk about, projects or his stalking phases, because that's how organized he was. The phases was very important to him. He was very much a creature of ritual. You watch his, his court, the videos of him in court. He talks about his phases. This doesn't show him stalking at all, really. It just shows him going up to a house and breaking in. Two of them don't even seem scared. Like the one victim, which he just puts like a skinned cow head on the table. That's what he uses to scare her. She's talking to him like they're friends, even though they don't know each other. Like, she is unaffected. The acting is terrible. Honestly, I would have to say, next to Diary of the Cannibal, because that's a more completely fictionalized account, this is actually named BTK. The character is Dennis Rader. As far as that goes, this has to be the worst serial killer film that I've seen. And unfortunately, this is not the only Uwe Lamel killer film that I have. I've also got the Green River Killer. A lot of them I couldn't get. Like Son of Sam is out of print. Killer Picton is out of print. DC Sniper is out of print. The only other ones I have is the Green River Killer and Night Stalker, because unfortunately, the 2016 Night Stalker with Lou Diamond Phillips has no DVD release. I can't remember what streaming service put it out, but it's like Peacock and Netflix that has so many great serial killer things on it. Won't release them on DVD. So yeah, I honestly, even if you're moderately into serial killers, skip this one. Don't even bother with it. There's really nothing BTK about this film, other than the fact his name is Dennis Rader, his wife's name is Paula. You know, he's involved with the church. He breaks into women's houses and kills them, and sends letters to the media, the police. It does say he uses the alias Bill Thomas Killman, also for BTK. That's the name he uses on the return address for the letters. So that's accurate. But other than that, there's nothing BTK about this. So definitely skip it. I really, really sincerely hope... I will lower my expectations for the Kane Hodder one because I've already read that this is half and half. But I'm expecting it to be at least a little better than that one. Even if I don't buy Kane Hodder as BTK. I mean, just because he played Jason and just because he played Victor Crowley does not mean he should be playing real-life serial killers. I'm sure there's one out there for him, but he's played BTK and he's played Ed Gein. Both of those I don't see Kane Hodder playing. Whereas Greg Henry, that picture alone of Greg Henry already way better than the Uwe Lamel film. This one I do have hopes for, so we'll see about that. So yeah, this film sucks ass. It's, as of right now, the worst serial killer film I've seen. But stay tuned for more this month. I got plenty more to get to, and thank you for watching.